Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome back from the break. Hopefully you all are very well caffeinated and ready to talk about some plant manager dashboards. So I think today, what really got me with a couple of the first presentations this morning is the question around how do we ask the big questions to solve our problems? And I think Andrea did a great job kind of teeing that up this morning. And when we started this project of developing the security dashboards for the plant managers, we were really focused on how do we make cybersecurity the cost of doing business rather than a barrier. And so talking with a lot of plant managers across a number of organizations, we really focused on what were those things that they needed to make their businesses more efficient. So before we dive into the meat of the presentation of developing these plant manager dashboards, we wanted to kind of set the stage with who is a plant manager. So for today's talk, we have John here. Some of you may work with John every day, some of you may be John, and some of you may never have heard of John. But today, John is the plant manager at ABC's largest chemical facility here in Miami. And he's got a number of different teams that are reporting to him, and his biggest challenges and the things that he's focused on today are really that continuity of operations, ensuring those safe operations, and the continued improvement in efficiencies at his plant. And how he's doing that today is really looking at how is he spending his money, where are those investments going, balancing the information, the technology, the operations, and their engineering priorities to really make sure that what he's doing today, how the plant is running today, is safe, efficient, and they're producing quality products across all of their product lines. But you can see on the left-hand side with the quote, cyber is on his radar. He's seeing the attacks in the news today. He's seeing a lot of the operations being affected by some of these attackers, but he just doesn't really understand all of the technical aspects of this environment. And honestly, there's a lot that he has to deal with the safety, the quality, and operations that cyber's kind of falling to the wayside. So as we approach this problem, as we approach this challenge, we really wanted to look at how can we bridge that gap between IT and OT and really bring some of these security initiatives to the front and give the plant managers what they need to be successful in their operations and driving down risks at their sites. So as we talked about earlier, and as Dale mentioned earlier in his talk, plant managers deal with KPIs every day. They're looking at data, they're looking at metrics daily, weekly, to really run their businesses. But those metrics that they're looking at today, and you can see some examples on these dashboards, are really focused around availability, the performance, the quality, the safety metrics at their site, because these are the things that they're being graded on today or they're being looked at today. And what we found as we were talking to these plant managers is this is what they cared about the most. This is what impacted their business operations. This is how they made sure that their sites, their employees were able to continue to come to work every single day. What they weren't being provided were the metrics into their site cyber risk. And what we found is, in order to maintain those efficient operations, we had to figure out how to relate cyber risk to their operational environment. And we had to give them a way, we had to empower these plant managers to really change the cyber behavior at their sites. So that was really a couple of the goals as we started developing out this dashboard, working with these plant managers, really being able to provide them the information that they needed to help get that visibility into cyber risk, empower them to change the cyber behavior, and really provide that opportunity for translation from what are all of these cyber things I should be caring about, and how can they impact my business? And how can I make better technology investments as we're going along to ensure that my operations aren't affected? So as we gathered kind of these three big ideas for the dashboard purpose, we really looked at these three key performance indicators that you can see there on the right-hand side. We used a framework of stop, protect, detect, and respond that we see every day from an IT perspective, but we're relating it back to the plant managers in three key areas around preventative controls, where focused efforts can really drive down risk, defensive protections, and security-related actions. And what we also thought about, and we realized when we talked to these plant managers, is as we developed these dashboards, we really needed to make sure we were giving them the so what. So when we provide these metrics to them, what does it actually mean? What can they do about it? What actions can they take? And how does that relate to ensuring, the operational excellence and efficient operations? When we took a look at how are we going to enable these key metrics, we kind of had those 3 high levels that we talked about. We looked at a lot of the data and a lot of the things that we were already enabling from an OT cybersecurity project. So we saw, there's a number of alerts. You can see there's security alerts. We're enabling those for the Security Operations Center. There's process integrity alerts. We're enabling those for site staff. There's dashboards that are showing, across the board, here is what my risk posture looks like as an organization. Here are where my top risks are. There's reports that are going out to really drive cyber behavior at the sites. Here are assets that are looking or going to risky websites that are accessing the internet. But all of these are really tactical, and they're really kind of focused on the site and the security organizations. There wasn't anything in these dashboards that we could show them that would really give them that, what is in it for me? What is the so what can I do about it? So then we looked at the data sources that we were already utilizing today. And we started with, on the left-hand side, you can see a number of data sources that have been enabled through typical cybersecurity projects that I think you guys are probably familiar with or have implemented at a number of your sites. Things like OT passive monitoring tools, network access controls, EDR. They all provide really great data, but again, very tactical for somebody sitting at a plant manager level. So we had to figure out, how can we take this data and give it back to the plant managers in a more meaningful manner? And what we looked at was, what are those added contexts that we could provide? Things like threat intelligence, asset criticality, trending metrics. And our goal was really to be able to show the plant managers, with a lot of these cybersecurity programs that you're implementing today, how can we gain the return on investment of these different devices, of these different security tools that are being put into place? Because I think as we talk about the IT/OT gap between, the conversations that we're having, how being able to show that return on investment of what you're bringing into these plant managers' site really helps gain that buy-in to enable them to say, hey, yes, I agree that these are the things that we need, and this is something that we need to be able to continue to operate efficiently. So once we understood where the data sources were, those added contexts, we were able to pull that together into a plant manager dashboard that gave the plant managers that visibility into the cyber risk and gave senior leadership into the visibility of the cyber risk of their sites. So now that we had the high-level KPIs that we were going to look at, we had the different data sources that we wanted to look at, we really needed to be able to pull all of this together into that dashboard. So how did we do that? So in order to ensure that we were leveraging the right data from these tools to develop these dashboards, we really looked at 3 key areas. First, we explored the plant manager role. So we sat down with John, we had a conversation about what are those things that are really important to him, and what are those things that he doesn't understand from a cyber technology perspective. So what we found is, there was the lack of cyber understanding, so we had to overcome how do we translate the cyber side into operations and make it matter. There were a lot of competing priorities. So from an investment perspective, there were things of, do I invest in a new product, do I invest in a new device, or do I invest in the cybersecurity tool, and what is that actually going to do for my business? And then the other thing that we found was interesting was the competition between the sites. And so by understanding, what drove a lot of plant managers, we were able to see that by gamifying the dashboard a little bit, by providing them some context of where they fell within the overall organization, there was a lot of drive to continue to be the best. And what was explained to us, for example, when we talked to a pharma plant manager was, if they want to be the site of somebody who's going to produce the next blockbuster medicine, they have to be executing well on all of their KPIs. And so providing this metric really enabled them to be able to say, hey, look, not only am I meeting my metrics from safety, process, production, efficiencies, but also I'm the most cyber secure site here. So the threat of me being impacted by a cyber event that we're seeing in the news today is less. So once we had that kind of conversation, we developed that plant manager persona, and we really utilized this to guide us as we went through the dashboard mock-up and the best practices. So again, we took a step back, we looked at all of those data sources, we looked at some of the metrics that we were already giving to the sites, to the teams, and we said, how can we pull these in? We mocked up these dashboards, and we utilized these to kind of pressure test against different sites, different stakeholders. And what we really wanted to do was not only bring the level up to a point where the site managers, the plant managers, could really have key metrics that they could take action on, but also if they needed to go and talk to somebody on the site, make sure that those site engineers also had that same information. So we wanted to make sure that we're correlating the data that the site engineers are getting, that the SOCs are getting, along with the plant managers. So once we reviewed that initial dashboard mock-up, we looked at the best practices. We then generated those dashboard metrics. And as I mentioned before, we really utilized that stop, protect, detect framework to categorize the metrics. So focusing on that first column there, the stop, we looked at things like endpoint protection, risky cyber behavior. For this particular example, they were really focused on a lot of their devices that are browsing the internet from the production floor. And I know we all think there's no devices on the production floor that are browsing the internet, but it does happen from time to time, and so they were really concerned with making sure we were locking those types of things down. Additionally, from a USB activity perspective, number of vendors coming in with USB, when we did the initial kind of dashboarding for the Security Operations Center, it was identified that 60% of the vulnerabilities were coming in from USB, from vendors coming in with USBs. So they were really wanting to focus on driving down some of that behavior as well. And then the criticality and vulnerability, so the number of unpatched systems. And Dale talked about this morning, there's always going to be those systems that are not going to be able to be patched. So the goal here was not necessarily to say, hey, you need to patch all of these systems, but to provide the visibility into, hey, these are some of the unpatched systems you have. What are some of the mitigating controls that you can do about it? But also, as you're looking at those technology refreshes, you're planning your CapEx budgets 3 to 5 years down the road, let's make a plan for these so that we can address them in the future and continue to drive down some of that risk. From a protect perspective, we wanted to really look at what are those high-risk devices. What are those devices that may be legacy operating systems that we know we need to operate today, but we want to make sure that we're giving them the attention that they need because they're such critical assets to our environment. And business impacts avoided, so virus threats and attempts blocked. So this is really focused on, you've implemented all of these security tools today. How successful are they at blocking these viruses and threats so that you can understand, hey, we implemented these tools, we did all of these tactical work streams, but they're doing their job and the investment was worth it. And last, the detect and respond. So unplanned cyber downtime. Obviously, uptime is key, production is key in these environments, and so we don't want any unplanned cyber downtime, whether it be from patching or an event or something that we couldn't have predicted. So providing them insights into the devices down, devices that had to be re-imaged because of a cyber event was key for this client so that they could understand those metrics. So once we had those desired metrics and we had iterated on them with the plant managers, we really leveraged a 3-phase approach to make sure the dashboard was developed in a manner that was valuable to the plant managers. So you can see we took about 5 months from start to finish to be able to roll this out. And a key thing was really integrating and collaborating with the plant managers. So you can see there, we started with the working session. We started with cyber leadership to really look at what those metrics are that we wanted to put on the plant manager dashboard. Once we understood those metrics, where we could get it from, we really started analyzing and cleaning the data within the environment so that we can make sure we're providing the best data to the plant managers, or the most accurate data to the plant managers. We then developed that mock-up in PowerPoint for the site and shared it with the team to include real data so that we could walk through step-by-step, metric by metric to say, hey, this is what we're going to be providing for you. Does this make sense? Where do we need to clear things up? Where do we need to provide additional detail? Or this isn't useful at all to me, we need to get rid of it. Which we got a lot. So finally, once we had alignment on those metrics, once we had alignment on, I understand this, I understand what I can do about it, I understand what the next steps are, we finalized that and we sent it out to a focused group within the organization. And this is where we got a lot of feedback from different plant managers across the organization, but it also opened up additional conversations and really helped bridge that gap between IT and OT. No longer was it, I'm putting this firewall here not because I want to keep the bad guys out, but because I want to keep IT out from scanning my organization. It was, hey, I'm having an issue here. Let's have a conversation about how we can solve this. How can I really drive down my risk from an endpoint protection perspective, from a patching perspective, from a firewall rule perspective? Where do I need to make technology investments to help drive down cyber risk? And so it really helped, instead of having these kind of contentious conversations, to building that relationship and fostering that relationship, which is so crucial as we go through the IT/OT cybersecurity journey. So after we went through this focus group and took all of our lessons learned, we worked through the development and delivery of the dashboards to the rest of the plant managers. And what we did is we delivered these dashboards in a similar manner that plant managers were already getting dashboards today. So we looked at, how often they were rolling out their KPIs on safety, process integrity, and really incorporated those dashboards into those same cadences. We also worked with the plant leadership during the rollout to make sure, we weren't just dropping something in their lap that they would have to look at on a weekly or daily basis without having any context. We set up working sessions, we worked through them, made sure they understand the KPIs, what they could do about it, and what the next steps were to resolve any issues or make any plans. So by distilling down that data into what plant managers can action, they were really able to use this to make informed risk-mitigated decisions. And so I know you all, this is what you guys were waiting for, of what does this plant manager dashboard actually look like? So you can see, as I started in this presentation, we talked about those 3 high-level KPI metrics. So we have, starting on the left-hand side, the preventative controls, and then on the right-hand side, we've got the defensive protections and the security-related actions. On the left-hand side, we focused on things like devices with critical or high vulnerabilities, which we were also giving that same data back to the site engineers. However, from a plant manager perspective, I may not care which specific device has a critical or high vulnerability, but I want to know how we're trending quarter over quarter. Are we making progress on driving down those critical vulnerabilities holistically across our sites? So what we provided was the number of devices, as well as kind of a metric there of, are we up from last quarter, are we down from last quarter, and then what does it look like over the year? Similarly to devices without security protections, we provided kind of that same metric looking at that, as well as devices end of life and devices accessing risky or malicious websites. On the right-hand side there, you can see that site comparative rating. And so what we did here, as I mentioned before, we really found that the plant managers were a little bit competitive with each other about whose site was the best. And so we wanted to provide a way to compare sites. However, every site is different. Some sites may have thousands of assets, some sites may have 5 assets. And so we really had to figure out how could we do a true site comparison ranking? So what we looked at was the percentage of assets of that site. And once we did that, we were able to align those sites in an order and provide them that visibility into where they fell within each site. On the right-hand side, we really focused on those defensive protections. So as I mentioned before, where existing controls can help you solve a larger problem. So these were looking at things like threat detected. So we've implemented a number of security tools, a number of devices that can really identify what threats are happening in my environment and things that the Security Operations Center or working in collaboration with the site we need to resolve. But one security incident isn't something that a plant manager is going to care about. But if I have 7, as you can see here, and we're up 3 from last quarter, maybe that's something I can take a look at and say, well, why is this happening? What is driving that behavior? What are the things that we need to look at to make sure that we're lowering that number and making sure we're trending down? And then lastly, the USB usage. So as I mentioned with this client in particular, they were really focused on the number of USBs that were coming into their environment just because of the risk that they were showing. So what they wanted to be able to see is the trending from how many USB devices were being inserted into their environment and really trying to drive down that behavior. And then lastly, you can see the devices taken offline to be remediated. So this was really focused on, you can see there for emergency patching or for re-imaging. And so that can drive the conversation, okay, what was the driver for this device being taken offline for emergency patching? Was it a critical vulnerability that we were seeing on the left-hand side? That's why we were trying to drive down some of those numbers there. Or was it another issue that we needed to talk about? Is this something that we need to start looking at for other devices and incorporating this in our planning from a technology refresh perspective? And then lastly, security-related actions in the bottom. This is more from a program management perspective. What are those activities on the cyber projects that we're doing today, and what is our progress? Because, Dale mentioned earlier today about we don't want to track progress against, just doing things, just plugging in a firewall, just putting in a device. However, we also know from a cybersecurity perspective, this journey is ever going. And so we need to make sure we're constantly looking at how are we refreshing our technology, how are we getting security protections out into the environment. And so really making sure that we're tracking those key actions, we're tracking those to completion. But you can see it's kind of in the bottom right-hand corner there. So it's not the focus, but it's something that we need to be tracking as an organization. So with that, giving you a little bit larger of a view of the Cyber Plant Manager dashboard, we were able to really be successful in pushing this out to the plant managers and gaining that buy-in and trust from them from an IT security perspective, and really helping to bridge that gap between the IT and OT. We were able to give them these KPIs in the same manner that they're looking at KPIs today, from a safety, from a process, from an efficiency perspective, and make sure that this is something that they can utilize to help continue to drive operational efficiencies. And what we found as we started rolling these out is we really did see the cyber risk posture improve at these sites, because now the plant managers had the visibility into their cyber risk to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. So I want to thank you all for coming to the talk today, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the poll or find me after the talk, and I really appreciate everyone's time today.